Te Pūkenga, which was the previous government's big mega merger of Polytechs, has now been unpicked by the current government, and they are re-establishing 10 regional Polytechs in their place. This was announced at Postcab yesterday. Now, on News Talk ZB Drive last night, I was joined by Penny Simmonds, who's the Minister for Vocational Education, and I asked her just about the costs of this.
Pretty much wasted, yes, because there's nothing to see for it. They didn't do the work getting the financial pathways. They didn't do the work in selling off assets that aren't needed. There's over $100 million worth of assets that aren't needed that will be sold off over the next couple of years. That's part of that financial viability pathway. You shouldn't have more assets than you need to have.
Penny Simmonds claimed that the previous minister, which is Chris Hipkins, was responsible, because he set up and was the minister while they implemented Te Pūkenga, responsible for wasting $300 million on the experiment, which is now basically over. Chris Hipkins is the Labour leader and he's with me now. Chris, good morning.
Good morning.
Is that outrageous from Penny Simmonds?
Well, I think Penny Simmonds' answer there, which suggests that the way to make Polytechs viable is to have them selling off their assets, is somewhat short-sighted. You know, in a place like Northland, she singled out Northland yesterday, where they have a big campus there in Northland. Once they've sold off all of the land that they currently have, how is Northland going to have a Polytech in the future if they don't have any land left and they're not financially viable? There are similar debates in places like Taranaki and the West Coast as well. You know, small regional Polytechs will potentially disappear under this new model that the government have gone back to, effectively. You know, it's back to the future. They're going back to a model that was already failing.
But weren't they already disappearing, which is why, you know, when you did the mega thing?
Well, that's exactly the point. We didn't want them to keep disappearing. So putting them together meant that the smaller Polytechs could leverage off the strength of the bigger ones, and the system as a whole would be more viable. The great irony here is last year, for the first time, Te Pūkenga actually turned a surplus. So things were starting to get there. Now, I'm the first to admit it was far too slow. Those first few years that Te Pūkenga was in existence, I don't think they made enough progress towards achieving the gains that we wanted from the Polytech system. But the irony is, just as they were starting to achieve those things, the whole thing's been turned upside down again. And it's right at the time when we desperately need more training. You know, we've got a higher unemployment rate, we've got people needing to reskill for new jobs, and the government's turning the system upside down.
Did you guys spend $300 million setting it up? I mean, is she right in saying that because they have now turned it around or demerged it, that it's $300 million wasted?
Well, a big part of that was writing off debts from the last system. So the previous Polytechs were all clocking up debts, not all of them, some of them were clocking up quite significant debts. We had to write off a chunk of that money. We had to put money into things that just hadn't been invested in, like all their IT systems were run down. So, you know, enrolment systems. They need to be able to, if you want students to be studying or training, you need to be able to enrol them, and their enrolment systems were run down. So
it's
a lot
not
of money
wasted.
needed to be invested to...
Not wasted money.
Well, it's wasted. It's wasted if the government choose to scrap everything that they had invested in. But those are choices that the current government are making, not the previous government. If they choose to, you know, if a house is 3/4 built and you say we're not going to complete it, we're going to demolish it instead, who wasted the money? The people who built 3/4 of the house or the people who demolished it?
Just on education, we had some NCEA results. This is from the co-requisite tests from high school students from Erica Stanford yesterday. So on the face of it, some pretty impressive numbers, particularly for low decile students in numeracy. There was like a 15 percentage point increase in improvement in achievement for these tests from May last year to May this year. The Minister says that's because she's literally just told them to focus on doing maths and put about $2 million extra money into low decile schools. Why didn't you do that?
Well, this is exactly why I introduced the co-requisite. The reason that we have this information, the reason that we're able to do this, is because as Minister of Education, I recognised that NCEA wasn't appropriately assessing literacy and numeracy. The old system wasn't working, and so we developed the co-requisite requirement that is now implemented. We implemented it as a government. So
yeah, but the results weren't great.
Unfortunately, Well, yes, but the first set of data only arrived after the last election. Now we've actually got that data and we can focus on improving it. This is exactly why we introduced the co-requisite.
Okay, that's great that we've got the test and you brought the test in. Well, good on you for that. That's a good thing. But what do you put that improvement down to? Is the minister right? Because personally, I'm shocked. We can get a 15 percentage point improvement in just 1 year by telling teachers in low decile schools focus on maths, and a $2.2 million investment. That's a massive payoff. What do we need to replicate this? Is this a success?
Well, I think the problem was under the old system with NCEA, you could get your literacy and numeracy requirements by doing things that perhaps weren't actually demonstrating that you had the literacy and numeracy skills that you need to be able to thrive in the real world post-school. And so introducing the requirements has meant that schools have had to focus more on it. That was the point. That's why we did it. And so I'm pleased to see these improvements. I hope that we'll continue to sustain this level of improvement.
Did you make that change? Did you make the change to take away all the other fluffy stuff? Or was that this government?
Yes. No, that was all work that was done while I was Minister of Education. And to be fair, there was some pretty significant pushback from the sector who weren't that keen on it. But we went ahead and did it anyway. And there are still some people in the sector who aren't that keen on it. But I think it's really important. Kids have to have those foundational literacy and numeracy skills in order to be able to thrive in the world.
How did we let this happen, Minister? Because this is probably the most important thing that a government can be responsible for, the education of our kids. It's the future of our country, it's growth, it's everything. And we let our schools stray into fluff and nothingness at the expense of our students' achievement in reading, writing and maths.
Well, there were several decisions along the way, but I think one of the most critical ones was made about 2012, I think from memory, which was to change how kids could achieve literacy and numeracy requirements for NCEA, in the sense that a much broader number of credits were deemed to be acceptable for getting your literacy and numeracy requirements. And I think what we saw from then is that kids were picking the easier credits in order to be able to get their NCEA rather than the ones that they really needed. So the reason that we've now completely separated out literacy and numeracy, it's now a co-requisite that sits alongside the other credits you do for particular subjects, was so that kids can't do that. You shouldn't be able to sidestep what is a core part of your qualification by doing easier credits. I think NCEA over time has become a race to gather as many credits as you can without necessarily thinking about the quality of those credits. And so that's the thing that we needed to change.
All right. Hey, just finally, Penny Henare going up against Oreni Kapara in the Tamaki Makaurau by-election. What do you think's going to happen? Because I'm picking Oreni's going to win. They've got a good ground game, Te Pāti Māori. They've got a bit of momentum. You guys perhaps don't have as much. What do you reckon?
Look, Penny Henare, if you look at it on the day count, lost by 4 votes last time. That was a pretty exceptional election for Labour. We weren't doing well in the polls. We're doing much better in the polls now. Penny Henare's in it to win it. I'm 100% behind him. I think he will win it. And we're going to run a very, very vigorous campaign to support him.
Appreciate your time this morning. Chris, have a good day. Chris Hipkins, a Labour Party leader, leader of the opposition with us every Tuesday morning.